Leo, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey
Oh, it's
podcast.
it's an honor, Chris. I mean, I don't think I have much to add about internet safety, but thank you for thank you for asking me.
Well,
I mean, you've had some of the biggest names in the business on. You know how to get good guests. I'm just maybe it
oh,
was the holidays. You didn't have a whole lot of people. Anyway, I'm glad I could be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I was back in your studio 10
That's right.
years ago, and we'll throw a photo of that
I've
in the
seen the
in the
pictures
show
to prove it.
notes.
Yes,
There is proof that I was actually there.
he's wearing a fez.
The Twit Fez.
But yeah, to be fair, we were all wearing fezes.
That's
Yes.
very true. Okay, so I was looking a little bit about your background, and you have been in media in some form or another for uh, not my entire lifetime, thank goodness,
Close
but
to it.
but close to it. Was
Since
was was that your
19
plan?
Yeah, well, sort of. Since 1976, that's when I got my FCC radio telecommunications operator third class ticket, which in the United States is what at the time you needed to work at a radio station because at radio stations you had to take meter readings. So it all started in college for me. College wasn't going all that well. I'm not a great student. Or you know what? I think I didn't I don't know what it was. I didn't like being assigned told what to do. So I wanted to, still a student, I guess, in many ways, but I don't like to being told what I have to
Yeah.
study. So anyway, it wasn't working out great. I think this was my sophomore year. And I decided to check out the campus radio station. And frankly, my ambition was to be an actor. The school I was at did not have acting classes for undergraduates. So I couldn't do that. In fact, I ended up majoring in Chinese history, which I don't. That was an example of me doing what I wanted to do, and maybe I should told me not to. Anyway, uh, but I also to pay my way was working in the campus dining hall, and I used to do voices as I served the mashed potatoes, which in hindsight was probably extremely annoying. But people would tell me things like, "Oh, you should be in radio," by which I now understand them to mean you should get the hell out of here and go do that somewhere where people want you to do that. Anyway, I took it seriously, went to the campus radio station. Like many colleges, they had a little station. Unlike colleges, this one was really an old one and was grandfathered in by the FCC. It was actually a commercial class license, so they could have ads. And so it was a little bit more serious.
Hmm.
And I worked there, fell in love with it, got my license, took a train to New York City to the FCC office to take the test, got my license.
Wow.
And that's what 47 years ago, 48 years ago, it'd be 47 years ago last December. So I'm getting close to my 50th anniversary in broadcasting.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, I never thought, I remember looking at ads where they said you have to have 3 to 5 years experience and thinking, oh, I'll never get that. Little did I know it was a life sentence.
Just add an extra zero to it.
Holy cow. No, but I've loved it. I really have loved it. It's a great, and I've been able to kind of change what I do. I mean, radio, the industry is kind of moribund a little bit,
Hmm.
partly due to the internet, but also to their own, malfeasance. But I was able to jump into podcasting. What happened is I was working in radio in the late 90s and at the same time writing for computer magazines. When I was doing radio early on, it was just a DJ or a general talk show host. But I had a kind of hobby. I got into computing pretty early on. I was dumping a lot of quarters into Chuck E. Cheese arcade machines, and I said, there's got to be a better way. So I went out and I got an Atari 2600, one of the original
Oh,
Atari
wow.
game consoles, and they called it the VCS, the video console system, video command system, and played, instead of playing Battlezone at Chuck E. Cheese, I played Atari Battlezone. It wasn't quite as good, but it saved me some quarters. And then I said, well, this is kind of cool, and I thought it'd be even more cool if I got the Atari made a computer at the time, Atari 400. So I got that, and that was kind of cool. They had Atari Basic, and I started typing in programs from Compute and other magazines, and then it had a membrane keyboard, and my fingertips were so sore. I said, and so then they had Atari 800, which had like a real keyboard. This was really Atari's clone of the Apple II. It was a
Hmm.
6502. processor. And so I kind of got more and more into that. And I thought, this is an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
And because a disk drive was like a $1,500 because nobody had disks. So I said, I better figure out a way to subsidize this. And that was writing for magazines. So I wrote for now defunct magazines like Byte and
Hmm.
InfoWorld, some really obscure Atari magazines, just little reviews and stuff. But it was a way to get stuff, and
Hmm.
it kind of. So I did that for a long time, and in parallel was a talk show host and a DJ. It was only in the early '90s that I was able to merge the two. Um, I got a chance to do a computer talk show thanks to John C. Dvorak, who was at the time a very well-known computer columnist, and he became a friend, and we started doing a show together. And then it gradually over the years turned into a full-time computer call-in talk show. Then I got into TV in the late '90s,
Hmm.
first with the site Ziff Davis, the company that I had written some stuff for and I was sort of working for, asked me to work on a treatment for a show. They said it's top secret, but Microsoft and NBC are going to create a channel called MSNBC, and they're going to need computer programming because it's MSNBC. And so they pitched. Ziff Davis asked me to write a treatment. We went up to the 30 Rock in New York City, the headquarters for NBC. When I rode up the elevator, the executive suite, and pitched along with some other Ziff Davis people a technology show for MSNBC.
NBC.
And they said, yeah. So I was doing a show called The Site, and I played a virtual character on that called Dev Null. And that was cool. So that was I had done a little TV before that.
Uh-huh.
I used to do regular segments and stuff. So I was kind of doing TV and radio at the same time, but this was really cool. And then when MSNBC realized, really, we're just NBC, forget the MS part. And they said, that was when Princess Diana got killed and it became an all news station and they dumped the technology stuff. So Ziff Davis said, well, okay, we'll do a 24-hour cable channel based on technology, which was a crazy idea
Yeah.
in 1998. Called, and you may remember, it was initially called ZDTV, but so many people thought it was about pasta that we had to change the name from ZDTV to Tech TV.
TV.
Oh, there's a thought. Paul Allen, who was one of the Microsoft founders, put a lot of money into it. Eventually, bought it entirely in I think around 2001, and by 2004 realized he was losing his shirt.
Yeah.
I think he lost several $100 million.
Oh, that's
So
painful.
yeah, well, when you're a multi-billionaire,
Well,
a few
what's a
hundred
few
million
$100 million
here, a few hundred
between
million there,
friends?
yeah. So he sold it to Comcast, and Comcast brought in their channel called G4, which is a gaming
Yep.
channel, and the guy who ran that, and they decided they wanted to go youth, so they fired me. They canceled a bunch of. They didn't cancel the show, but they canceled a bunch of hosts who were a little over the hill and kept the younger ones. Kept doing the show, The Screensavers, which I was hosting with Patrick Norton, but they got rid of me and Patrick because we were a little too old for the demographic they thought they were going to serve. Kept the young people. Um, so there I am, 2004. I kind of knew this was coming, so I had gotten back into radio, started doing a radio show at KFI in Los
Hmm.
Angeles. The tech guy, I was the tech guy on KFI. See, it rhymes. And did that for a few years. And after about 3 years of that, I said, this is, I don't know. I had started a podcast network at the same time because I was only working on weekends. And I thought, well, that means I have 5 days a week. I should do something else. I don't want to be a lazy bones. So I started a podcast network in late 2004. First show was the radio show. Second show was what we called Twit, This Week in Tech. And that was the name of that became the name of the network.
Was it even called podcasting back then?
Yeah. It all started because I was doing the radio show and I was putting the shows on the web. So even from day one, I'd asked KFI, can I just take the recordings and put them on the web? And they said, yeah, who would want that? So I put them on the web. And then in September of that year, 2004, a kid, and I'll never forget him. He's around still, and I love him. Matt Bischoff called me. He was 14 years old and said, hey, are you going to make a podcast out of it? And I said, what's a podcast? And he explained, well, it's what you're already doing. It's a audio on the web, but it has an RSS feed. So people will be alerted that you've posted a new show. I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And for a long time, I was just, typing in the XML for the
Yeah.
feed by hand. And that was the first podcast. Then about spring of 2005, actually, it started in January 2005 at Macworld Expo because I'm a radio guy. I had, the microphone, I had the headphones and a recorder. So I just gone to Macworld Expo, and a bunch of my old Tech TV friends, including Patrick, who, and a few others, Kevin Rose, were at Macworld Expo. I said, let's go over to this brew pub, and I have the recording equipment. Let's just do a little roundtable. So we did. It was the very first episode of Twit. But at the time we didn't call it Twit. We called it the Revenge of the Screensavers. But Comcast quickly put an end to that.
Yeah.
So uh, I recorded it, and I had like 20,000 people downloaded it, and I went,
Hmm.
well, maybe there is something to this podcast. Maybe Matt Bischoff was right. So but there was a problem, is none of us were in the same area.
Hmm.
And so, and this was well before people got used to Zoom and even
Yeah.
Skype and all that stuff. So I thought, well, I can't really do it because we're not, I couldn't do it every week. About April of 2005, somebody called the radio show on Skype, and it sounded like we sound right now. It was like you're in the room with them. So what do you do? How? Because, normally when you listen to a talk radio show, it's very bad quality. So this sounded so good. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm using this thing called Skype. And that's when a light bulb went out. And I thought on my head, and I thought it went on, not out. And I thought, well, we could probably do a podcast this way. And we did. We started doing it. It was a lot of work because I didn't have isolated tracks for each
Yeah.
person. They were all in one big muddy puddle, and the quality, bandwidth, everything was terrible. So I'd spend hours after every show kind of trying to
Oh,
fix it.
you doing all your own audio editing?
Well, it's just me. Yeah. I had
Oh
rented a
wow.
little, people thought I was in my basement, but actually I'd rented a little, a garret, a little attic office. I mean, really little. It was 10 feet by 5 feet or something. It was tiny, and was doing it up there. And, but it grew because people got a lot of attention. There was some demand for it, mostly because people who used to watch Tech TV kind of missed that old style.
Yeah.
The new channel wasn't really the same, and so uh, I thought, well, maybe this is a business. I started an LLC, and we slowly grew it by adding shows, uh, and it's funny. That's the way up. We peaked probably 2015, 2014. And then, but podcasting peaked in like 2017 or 18 with Serial and all that. And some of the attention, some of our audience got pulled away into big name
Yeah.
podcasts, and and then now, a few years later, really, YouTube stars are really dominant. That's where most of the advertising is going to YouTube and Google. And podcasting is a little bit smaller than it was. So we don't, we're not, I don't want to go out of business. A lot of
Yeah.
podcast networks have gone out of business this year and last year. But we're trying not to do that. So we're shrinking down. I now understand when a company says we're right sizing, it's not really a euphemism. It is a euphemism, but it's not. What they're really trying to do is they've got too many people, and so we've shrunk down a little bit. We're smaller. It's about 15 people who work for me now. I do 6 shows, and I'd say we do 3 or 4 more. We have a very active membership club
Hmm.
that has sustained us. In fact, if it weren't for that, I don't know if we'd still be around, but we fortunately, Patreon really changed
Yeah.
everything.
Was it actually? I was about to say sort of like Patreon, but or was it exactly Patreon?
It's a Patreon company they acquired called Memberful,
Okay.
that's designed specifically for what we're doing. Um, when they have the back end for, like, when you join, you get a special feed that's just for you,
Hmm.
that is of the ad-free version of the show and stuff like that. And they have all that back end, the payment system and all that. We can't do that. So
Oh
it's
yes.
worth the
Yeah.
cut that they take, which is not insignificant. But we don't have the expertise or the manpower to do that. So
Well, that's one of the amazing things about the internet these days is that you can now work with companies like that, and they take all of it off your shoulders, and you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have someone in house that can do everything.
I'll tell you, I mean, if I were starting Twit today, it would be a completely different kind of business. When I was starting this in 2004, there was no, like I said, I was doing the feeds by hand. There was no infrastructure, but also I had in my head this idea that I'd come from mainstream media. I kind of thought, well, I'm kind of like building a local TV station or radio station, but
Hmm.
without the antenna. And it's because, we have video, we have a studio, we have a control board, we have all the things a small TV station would have. We stream live, we do all those
Yeah.
things, but we do it at a fraction of the cost. And at the time, I knew how much it cost to do tech TV. I thought, hey, I'm 1/100th of the cost of tech TV. Next step, profit. And for a long time, that was true. But nowadays, it's way overkill. Nobody does what we. It's silly unless you're Marquez Brownlee
Yeah.
to have a dedicated studio. At one point, we had a 10,000 square foot studio with a 10,000 square foot basement. We had, 40 cameras.
Oh my
We
goodness.
had, I mean, it got really elaborate, and mostly it's because it was my like
Well,
playpen.
I was about to say that a lot of my business with whatismypadrace.com has been about, well, this is just fun for me.
Right.
I want to. We were talking before we started recording that I ran the website out of my house. I had a Barracuda load balancer, and so I had fixed wireless because
You
I
would
couldn't get enough copper into my. And this
you
was
would
just
never do that
fun.
today. Yeah,
If
but
I,
you would never do it that way now.
no, never. I mean, if I look back at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world was I thinking?
But you had to pretty much. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
thing. And technology changes so fast. Everything's changed so fast that in the old days, you'd start a business and you'd have, your business cycle would have, you'd probably have a few decades before things changed so much that, your way of doing business was out of touch,
yeah,
like Polaroid or Kodak. Nowadays, that happens in 5 years or even less. So, uh, you have to be pretty nimble, I think,
yeah.
to continue to succeed in this internet era.
So, how long did you have the Tech Guy radio show?
19 years. Started that in 2004, and I retired last year, about a year ago. And the reason was it wasn't making any money anymore.
Mm,
It was similar to this podcast thing. I mean, radio's a little ahead of time.
yeah,
Radio's dying even faster. So they couldn't sell it anymore, and I didn't want to do it for free. It wasn't quite free, but it was. I think I was getting I think it was $5,000 a month or something. It was a small amount compared to what it had been and what it should be for a
yeah,
national show that's on 500 stations. So I just said yeah, and it was mutual agreement. I said I think it's time to call it quits. They had somebody they wanted to use, Rich DeMuro, who does the
hmm,
KTLA tech stuff. He's actually on syndicated all over on TV, and he wanted to do. He's always wanted to do it. He was always kind of in the wings as somebody to take over for me on
yeah,
vacations and stuff. So I said, yeah, Rich would be great. Rich is taking it over. I'm happy. He's happy. I hope they're making money on it. But honestly, radio is not a great business anymore. I don't think.
yeah.
Who
It's
listens to radio?
I do.
Do you really?
Okay. So my wife and I are. We have probably listened to. We're down in the Los Angeles area. We've probably listened to KFI. I've probably listened to KFI for 25, 30 years. That it's just the
It's the people, right?
it's the people, but we just always have a radio on in the background somewhere. And if we're
It
driving,
has
it's
to
just
coincide
on.
with your life.
Yeah,
Almost all radio listening is in car. I mean, very few people listen at home. Do you listen at home too?
yeah. It's just if I usually tell my
God
wife to
bless
turn
you.
off the radio when I'm recording, but it's usually on.
Do you have a collection of buggies? No,
Buggies?
I'm kidding.
No. Oh.
How's the horses?
No, no
No,
horses, no buggies. I do have the one behind me.
oh, you do. See, there you go. You are an old timer. No, I love radio. Look, the medium, and that's the thing. Podcasting is the same for me. It's a voice in your ear.
Yeah,
So I love the medium. You don't have to have a tower anymore to do it. The
yeah,
internet really is superior. I just bought a new car, and comes with XM satellite radio, and it's like, well, fine, but as soon as the free subscription runs out, I'm not going
yeah.
to renew it because it's all on my phone. I got it
Yes.
all right here. And so I think that's a good example of a business, huge capital expense to set XM
Oh,
Sirius
my
up.
goodness.
But times change so rapidly. Internet has completely changed everything. And, I mean, that's what your show is about, frankly,
Yeah,
is kind of navigating this world that is so different from even a few years ago.
yeah, absolutely. So, when you start doing this is behind the scenes questions, I guess. Doing the radio show, how did you manage all the random questions that you get? I mean, it's really surprising. So I have a support email address, and I don't know why people ask me the questions that I would
They're
expect all the
desperate.
questions would be IP address related questions,
No,
but it's
people
I
are
get random
desperate.
questions.
People are desperate. And I think that's what's really why it was hard for me to leave the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard to be a user these days. If you're lucky, you have a family member or a close friend who's willing to help you, but usually that support wears out
Yeah.
pretty quick, right? People are desperate for the information. So you ask me how I would, I mean, here I am going on the air 6 hours a week answering completely. I mean, they're screened, but only screened for, to see if you're a driveling idiot or crazy. And even then it failed mostly. Uh, uh, we don't screen for content. So it was random questions about technology. And what really motivated me to keep up was sheer terror because, you don't want to look like an idiot on the air. I always promised myself that I wouldn't make up an answer or
Mm-hmm.
or ad lib an answer that might not be accurate. I didn't want to be like ChatGPT. I didn't no hallucinations. So I really said to myself again and again, it's okay to say I don't know. That's in real life. That's sometimes hard for people to
Yeah.
say. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that. But every time I said I don't know, it was stimulus to the next day go out and find out and learn it, so that the next time somebody asked that question, I'd be able to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that for 19 years, and pretty soon you can answer pretty much every question
Yeah.
that comes in.
And then if I remember it, you also had the chat room going live
Yeah,
with.
that was always really helpful. Even when I started doing radio in the early '90s, we would have a chat room. That's why it was an IRC because it
Mhm.
started in the '90s. That's IRC is a technology that even predates the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
But these internet relay chat rooms supported me for years because yeah, there were smart people in there. I always kind of acted like the radio show was a user group. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that. It wasn't Ask the Answer Man. It wasn't. I mean, I think sometimes people thought of it that way, but really, I didn't want it to be. I'm the Answer Man. Ask me anything. It was more as a community. There's pretty much nothing we can't figure out
Yeah.
between me, the other people listening to the show who will call in our chat room. We could probably answer almost any technology question, and that was, I think, a sensible way to do it. I didn't want to set myself up as,
I know
God.
everything.
I know every. Yeah. Ask me any question.
It,
Uh,
it wasn't Ask Jeeves.
I did. Yeah, right. I did take great pleasure though in knowing this stuff and and mostly what I thought the value that I added was not merely knowing it, but being able to kind of explain it in a way that made sense. I like to use analogies. I didn't want to dumb it down. I never wanted to
Yeah.
dumb it down. I wanted to treat my audience as intelligent, but I also understand that they're not computer experts and not technology experts. So to explain it to them in a way that they can get it. Because really the ultimate goal of the show and even of all the podcasts that I do, the ultimate goal is to educate people on technology so that they can use it, so they can understand it, so they can be an active player in their fate. And I think that's really important. It's more important now than ever.
Yeah. That's always a hard line to figure out in terms of I don't want to be hyper technical and confuse people, and I don't want to dumb it down
Right.
to where it's not helpful or it doesn't help them to be able to say, "Oh, now that I know this, I can apply it to these other things."
Yeah, I didn't want to patronize people either. I didn't want to I always want to assume that you're intelligent. You just don't know this particular thing. So I always, and that's the nice thing. I think the thing I love about talk radio that I miss a little bit in podcasting is talk radio is a conversation. The other person's on the other one. So you could say, well, does that make sense? Do you understand that? What is
Mm-hmm.
it? And they can do follow-ups. And so it really is a dialogue. And that's something I miss a little bit in podcasting. We do our podcast live for that reason. We have a chat room for that reason, but it isn't quite as interactive as call-in radio. There's
Yeah.
nothing like call-in radio for that.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, were there reoccurring themes that you saw where kind of consumers were getting themselves
Yes.
in over their heads, or
Well, a lot of what we did is what you do on this show, which was help people stay safe online, and particularly against scammers. That's become more and more of a problem. The people who listen to my podcasts are, for the most part, tech enthusiasts,
Mhm.
so they're somewhat well educated on this stuff. The people who listen to the radio show were normal people in their
Yeah,
cars or doing their shopping, and they had real questions, and and as you point out every week, they had real vulnerabilities. There's real soft spots out there, and the bad guys have no compunction about pushing on those.
yeah,
And so, the latest, of course, is pig butchering. I'm sure you've talked about this. I practically every week get on and say, hey, if somebody texts you and says hi, they're not your friend. If somebody texts you and says, hey, this is Joe, I'm not going to be able to come into work today. Can you cover for me? It isn't some nice, innocent fellow who got the wrong number. It's a scammer. And now we're learning, and I don't know if you saw the New York Times expose on this, but now we're learning that the people who are doing this are actually, to some degree, slave labor.
yes,
It's a terrible, terrible business. It just shows you how evil people can be when they're greedy. People who are normal people, but somehow get sucked into this as a job, get put in a compound. They're locked in. Their passports are taken away. They're living in a dormitory with hundreds of other people and thousands of smartphones. And their entire job all day long
Ugh,
is pig butchering, is saying, "Hey, what's happening?" And then getting in a conversation with you. And I know you've talked about this, but it's bears repeating. I'd repeat it
yeah,
every week on the radio show. They are not trying to get to know you. They are not your friends. Ultimately, there will be a con. Ultimately, they will take money from you. They might try to sell you cryptocurrency. They might say, oh, man, they might have a sob story for you. They are sneaky as heck, and
yeah,
they're terrible. And the thing is, these poor people who are doing it are very strongly motivated to do it because they're in effect slave labor.
yeah,
So they get in trouble if they don't deliver. It's really a terrible, terrible scam. And it happens in areas of the world where they're not well regulated,
yeah.
and they can get away with this. It's terrible.
I know. I when I got my first text message that was hi, I was like,
Oh,
okay, I don't recognize this area code.
I should just look at my phone because I get them all the time. And what's interesting is how they've gotten more and more clever about what they'll say, because what they're trying to do is, as always, as every scam, and if you listen to the show, I hope you do, you know this, every scam is to play upon your
Yeah.
either greed, fear, or ignorance,
Or,
and
or even good naturedness.
or you're good natured,
Hey, like you said, hey, this is Bob. Can you cover my shift?
right?
Well, clearly, I want to tell Bob you've got the wrong person.
Exactly. You want to be a nice guy. That's when they take advantage of your good naturedness.
Yeah.
But almost all con games, going back to time immemorial, rely on your greed as well. And
Yeah.
so eventually they're going to get you by saying, hey, I could invest some money for you that would make you a lot of money, something like that. So don't fall for that. Yeah, I see a whole bunch of, there's somebody who keeps offering me money.
They just want to support they just want to support Twin.
Yeah, no, there's somebody who thinks my name is Michelle.
Oh.
Never has been. I'm getting a lot of email text from somebody who's saying, Michelle, I could lend you up to $10,000 right now.
Oh,
But that's
thank
not a
you.
pig butchering scam. That's just a sales scam, right? I have quite a few of these. Quite a few of these. Usually, I don't think it does any good, but usually I'll block and report.
Yeah.
The only reason to report it is so that they can't use that phone number anymore. But that's why they have thousands of
Yeah.
smartphones on a
And
rack.
there's
They don't.
so many platforms where they can get so
You can
many.
fake your
Yeah.
spoof your number. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, yeah, it irks me to say that happens.
The good news is that, and I'm sure you covered this. We covered it. There are three guys who were responsible for a lot of this who have been arrested. The thing is, it's not the people who are running the slave farms down in Myanmar
Yeah.
It's people, in order to get the money into a bank account, they have to have confederates in the US and elsewhere that can help with these financial transactions. So they got three of them, and that's good news. You know, it's hard to prosecute this stuff. That's the real reason it exists.
And because so many of the people moving the money are people that have been snookered into a scam of moving the money.
Right,
Like in a sense, yeah, they've now become complicit in the crime, but they're a victim in the same way.
right. It's really it makes you despair about humankind.
Oh, yes.
Honestly, I know you had Troy Hunt on, who's one of the greatest people in the world, and I don't know how he keeps his good humor because he's seen all of these horrible scams, and
Yeah,
at some
yeah.
point I would just say people are awful.
Well, I think we do it because we have the hope that there are people out there that are good, and
Yeah,
we want to help those people.
I
The
think
evil people, they'll get what's coming to them.
90, well, or they won't, but
Yeah,
whatever. 99.9% of humans are great and are wonderful, but we all have this little tiny bit of devil in us,
yeah.
and unfortunately, some people let it take over. It makes me sad when I see it.
Yes.
It's really sad.
So I want to ask you a question that I would normally have asked you before we started recording. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, not intentional. I'm always trying to talk about um, people not should not feel ashamed if they've fallen for a scam or if they've been
No,
hacked. And so I try to particularly ask people who are in cybersecurity or who talk about scams a lot, have you ever been scammed, hacked, fallen victim to a cybersecurity incident, or
I
someone in your
am
family?
pretty lucky I haven't, but I do have my ex-wife did to the tune of $5,000. And it was a pig butchering scam.
Hmm.
Um, she it's sad because she is just the most generous, kind, and loving person, and that's why they get her every
Hmm.
single time. Our gardener, our landscape gardener, I guess his Yahoo mail. This was really common a few years ago. His Yahoo mail got hacked. We got an email from him from his address. He knew our name because they'd gone through his email,
Yeah.
so he knew our name. He knew his name. He knew his business, and it said, "Hi, Jennifer. I'm in Europe, and I just got mugged. They took my passport. They took my wallet. I don't know who to call. I can if you can wire me $1,000, I can get home. I want to come back to work next week." And she was this
Oh,
close to sending the money. Um, uh, I don't know why she's the one in our family who keeps getting bit. I don't know what it is. I've told her again and again. Um, it's really easy to fall for this stuff.
yeah.
I've come close. You know, I got I think it was a link somewhere that looked like it was a link to Twitter, and I clicked it and it was a Twitter login page. And that's when I started thinking and I looked at the address and it wasn't Twitter, it was
Yeah.
Tvitter. But on the screen, it looked really close to TW. And had I entered my credentials, then they would have gotten my Twitter account. Now, one way I avoid this, I mean, fortunately, I saw it, but even if I
Yeah.
hadn't seen it, you've said this a million times, turn on two factor. Because even if I had entered my login and password, they wouldn't have been able to get my account because they wouldn't have had the two
Yeah.
factor. And that's really, I know it's an annoyance. It's the hardest thing in the world to get your sophisticated family and friends to do this, but it makes a huge, even my wife, who I wish she would, is reluctant to use two factor because it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
But I keep hammering it home. There are these stages that you get your loved ones and your family to go through. First one, get a gosh darn password manager
Yeah.
and use it. Second one, turn on two factor. But if you can get people to do this, maybe inch by inch, they won't get scammed for the most part. They really are going to be a lot safer
Yeah.
online. They're much less likely anyway to get hacked or lose their Facebook account. I mean, we used to get that call on the radio show all the time. I lost my Google account, I lost my Facebook account, and it's a tragedy for those people, especially as many did if they're running their business through their
Hmm.
Facebook account. They haven't just lost their personal account, they've lost their business account. It's a tragedy. And I think people also assume that Facebook, Google, Twitter, Microsoft, Apple are like normal mom and pop businesses, like your storefront down the street. They're not. They're massive behemoths. I had one caller call the show. She said, I lost my Google account, but you know what? I found their offices in Irvine. And I
Ah.
went down there and I banged on the door. And I said, oh, interesting. Did anybody answer? She said, no. I said, nobody's inside that building. And if they are, they're salespeople. They can't help you. Uh, People assume it's a normal business. Google, for the most part, tech support is a Python script.
Yeah.
It's not a human being.
Yeah, there's no phone number you can call for tech
No,
support.
no, unless you pay them. If you pay them for something, this is the other thing I try to drill into people's head. We're so used to free internet.
Yeah.
We forget that nothing's free. And one of the things you give up with a free service is support. You're
Yeah.
not support. Are you kidding? They can barely afford support when you buy a $3,000 laptop. Support is a very expensive thing to do. It takes humans. It takes a call center. It's an expensive thing to do. So don't expect support. Don't expect much sympathy, even
Yeah.
if you lose your account. It probably says somewhere in the fine print, it probably says exactly that. Don't hold us responsible. It's not our fault.
Yeah, that's the tough thing for people is like, oh, my account got compromised. Clearly, something bad happened to you,
Yeah.
and there's nowhere that you can go.
There's very little recourse. Yeah. And that was the hardest call for me to take on the radio show for 19 years. First, it was their AOL account, then it was their Excite account, then it was their GeoCities account, then it
Oh,
was their
wow.
Google account. It's been going on for 19 years. No, and we never learn. We never learn. But what are you going to do
It'll be a Chat GPT account next.
next? Well, get ready. I'm just fascinated. I'm sure you are by the advent of AI. And for a long time, I was very skeptical about it because
Mhm.
it just seemed like, well, it's kind of like a parlor trick. Oh, nice. It's, able to generate kind of reasonable sounding text, but it's not very intelligent. But increasingly, we're getting closer and closer to a time when it is. And this is going to really enable scammers. They
Yes.
won't need slave farms anymore. I mean, this is going to be a huge, uh, not improvement in the quality of the attacks, but a vast increase in the number of attacks.
And yeah, because they can ramp it up if they're not relying on a human being to enter
Right.
stuff. It's
They
all
can scale it infinitely.
infinitely scalable,
Yeah.
which is
Uh,
scary.
and then, I have a friend who works I have a lot of friends who work in AI, but I have one friend in AI who's very bullish about AI. He says it's going to get really weird in the next 10 years. And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that I think he might be right, that a lot of we were talking about how quickly the business cycle has turned in the internet era. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, good example. Sports Illustrated created
Yeah.
a bunch of AI authors to write for their website to promote
Right.
products and created personalities for each of these AI authors. And someone called them out on it, and all of a sudden, all that content is gone. The
Yeah.
CEO is now gone.
Yeah. We're going to see a lot more of that. That's not going to stop anybody.
Yeah.
It's just the beginning. I think that you will, and I will, and everybody listening will at some point in the next 5 to 10 years have a very competent AI assistant. I'm not talking Siri or Alexa or
Yeah.
Google. I'm talking an AI assistant that actually can do stuff for you. I think that's just around the corner. I created a couple of use Chat GPT. They have that new thing you can create a GPT, which is what we in the old days used to call an expert system.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're an auto repair guy, if you could get all the manuals that you have to, all that 6 foot shelf of paper that you have to thumb through to figure something out. If you could get an AI to ingest it all, then you could just query the AI. Hey, I'm looking here at the lug bolt on the oil tank, and it seems to be stripped. What should I do? And it can tell you and show
Yes.
you uh, that's here. That's here. I've created a couple of them for the programming language I use. I used to have to thumb through books,
Hmm.
search for answers, go to Stack Exchange and places. And now, not only do I get really because what I did is I fed it all the books that I use,
Hmm.
and I said, don't ever answer anything that's not in the book. And so I don't worry about it making up stuff, and I get very useful, competent
Oh,
answers.
that's cool.
It's a smart index in some respects, but it also synthesizes. So it can say, "Oh, I see they're talking about that subject here and this subject there and that subject there. I can put those three things together into a coherent paragraph that saved me searching around." That we're there already. That's happened. Uh, so I think that there are going to be some really useful tools
Yeah.
that we will be getting. It was a huge revolution in technology when the App Store happened, right? The App Store revolution started on the iPhone, is now on Android. Uh, that created a whole new multi-billion-dollar economies, changed completely how we use computers. We're about to enter the App Store era for AI.
Hmm.
And I think the same explosion is going to happen over the next few years in AI apps, whether it's on your phone, on your TV, in your car. Everywhere you go, there will be a personable, knowledgeable assistant who can help you in real ways. Now, I'm not talking like Siri.
Yeah.
Well, let me show you what I found on the web about that, but real useful ways.
I'm looking forward to the day where my glasses have, I guess, AR built into them when it knows this is somebody that you know, but it's outside.
Right.
I'm one of those people who, if I only interact with somebody in a particular context and I run across them at the
Oh,
grocery store,
happens to me all the
they're
time. I
like,
know
"Hey,
this
Chris,"
guy.
and I'm just like, I no idea who you are because it's the context is different. Where the glasses will say,
Exactly.
"Hey, this is Bob.
It's
You
Joe. He's
know
the
him from
butcher. You,
here."
you you buy your bacon from this guy. You see him every day. What are you talking? No, we're there, by the way, very close to it. Meta's Ray-Ban glasses now are very competent. They have an AI assistant. They talk to you, and they just added the feature that it has a camera. You can take a picture of something and say, "What's that?" or
Ah,
translate that, or who I think soon, who is that? The only thing that's stopping that right now is privacy issues.
yeah,
And this is where I'm funny. I'm a privacy advocate, but at the same time, and this has always been the case, if you are able and willing to give up some of your privacy, which I do, by the way, I have
yeah.
no privacy. There's some real benefits that you can get out of that. And I think that's going to be a really interesting over the next few years kind of debate over, well, do you want this AI to be useful or do you want to be completely private? I think many people will say, no, no, I don't care. But those of us who are willing to give up our privacy might get some real benefits. There might be something to watch out for there.
And you may see stuff. I would love to see the AI good enough that I have an interaction. It's it's
It's
always
recording
watching
it,
us.
it's
It's
understanding it,
not
it's
necessarily
synopsizing.
recording it, but it's, hey, you had a conversation with Bob.
Right.
Your AI
Again,
now knows who Bob is. He talked
we
about
can
his wife,
we
his
can do that
kids.
today. The only thing stopping is privacy concerns,
Yeah.
right? The humane pin, that you pin on there, is intended to record all your conversations.
Hmm.
I have a good friend who he asked permission, but he recorded we were the three of us sitting around at a table, recorded the conversation. A couple of minutes later, he says, "Well, here are the synopsis." He had the device record it, transcribe it, send it to an AI, synopsize it, provide a task list of things we were going to do, action items. It did it all in a matter of a minute or two at a low cost. But it has a privacy issue, right? You can't go around recording every conversation you have.
Yeah.
Or can you, or should you? This is going to be an interesting question.
I mean, I would love that sort of thing for meetings where it's, hey,
Sure.
everyone's in agreement. We're on this Zoom call together. We know it's going to be
Yes.
recorded. And at the end of the meeting, the AI kicks back, hey, Chris, you're going to take care of this and you're going to get it done by this date. So and so, you're going to take care of these
Right.
things.
Well, you can sort of do that already. And that's only going to get by the end of this year,
Yeah.
by the end of 2024, absolutely, you'll have those kinds of features. And it will be opt in. I guess it has to be opt
Yeah.
in. I would love it if it could just record my whole day, right? I mean, I can't because of privacy issues, but I would love every conversation I have, every interaction I have. That's how it would know that that's your butcher. It would only know that that's your butcher because it was recording your
Yeah.
interactions with them
At the butcher shop.
at the butcher shop. So, I honestly, it's going to happen
Yeah.
because the companies that are doing this know you want it. They also know you want privacy, but they know you want it. And so they're going to find a way to give it to you.
The impression I get is the vast majority of people say they want privacy. If you ask them, do you want
Sure.
privacy? But in practice,
Right.
they really don't want private. They want just a very minimal amount of privacy. I want this stuff to be public, but this is this small subset of stuff I want to be private
It's
about.
completely, look, I'm not saying you don't have every right. It's completely correct that you should get to choose.
Yeah.
It's your stuff. You should totally get to choose. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying there's a price to be paid. You're not going to have the AI isn't going to be as good as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, we live in very, very interesting times,
We do.
and
That's the truest thing ever said. It's amazing.
I mean the fact that we can have this conversation on opposite ends of
Yeah,
California,
look at
and
this.
the video quality is as good as the
This
video
is
quality
light
is
years
great.
ahead of what when I started podcasting, what we could do. It blows me away. And well, I mean, we were talking before the show about bandwidth. Everybody has amazing, yeah, everybody, most people have amazing bandwidth that we completely take for granted. But for you and me trying to run our little businesses on a dial-up line or a T1, this is amazing. And we know we still take it for granted.
Yeah. I mean the fact that I've got a fiber internet connection coming into my home
Right.
under $100 a
Right.
month with 99.999% uptime
It's amazing.
compared to 20 years ago, my DSL, or I guess closer to 30, yeah, no, yeah, 20 some odd years, 25 years ago, a 1.5 megabit DSL was cutting edge.
Oh yeah.
That
Oh,
was,
I
oh my
remember.
gosh, that's fast, Chris.
I
How did
got
you?
an ISDN line. It wasn't so long ago. I got an ISDN line, and I mean, this was very complicated. You have to have a CSU, DSU, all this equipment. And what did I get? I got 128 kilobits times two. I mean, it was barely faster than a 56K modem.
Yeah.
It was like 456K modems. But boy, did I feel like I was living in the space age. And that was just a few years ago. That was my first broadband connection. We've come so far. And I think, going to continue to go so far. And I
Yeah,
think the next thing is AI. And get ready because it's going to be a wild ride.
it is. So we have gone an appropriate length of time here.
Are you saying it's over?
Look, if it were you and me, I would. We're sitting in the house together. I'd go on for about 4 hours. But we have families that were going to be like looking at their watches, saying, "What is this guy doing?"
My wife said, "You're doing another podcast?" All right, I'm going to Target. So I got until the Target run is over. No, I think this is probably a good time to wrap it up.
I think this is perfect. So, where can people find more about Twit, and what are the shows again that you guys run?
It's really simple. The best thing to do is Google Twit, TWIT. To my knowledge, let me open a incognito page to make sure this is still true. If you Google Twit, I think we're the number one thing you'll find. But oh no, right after Merriam-Webster's definition of a silly, annoying person, a fool, you'll find us. Tech podcasts from people you trust. This week in tech. That's just Google Twit. It still works.
Awesome.
Right between the definitions. A pregnant goldfish and a silly, annoying person. That's me.
A pregnant goldfish. That's awesome.
People, every week I get an email from somebody saying, "You know what Twit really means?" I said, "Yes, I do.
Yes,
I know
yes.
that.
I've been doing this a little while.
Yes, I know."
Leo, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. So great to talk to you, Chris. Come visit us again.
I will.
Good.